Welcome everyone. My name is Charity Counts. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Midwest Museums. I'm glad you could join us today for our last in a series of virtual awards events. We're super excited to get to celebrate the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites today. I'm glad you could join us. To start our program, Greg Whitcup, a member of our board, would like to offer a native land acknowledgement on behalf of AMM.
Thank you, Charity. As we begin today's program, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have historically been and continue to be the stewards of the land we today call the Midwest. While we are gathered here for this event virtually, each of us joins from the unceded land of indigenous peoples. Because many of us today are located in Indianapolis, Indiana, I invite you to join me in acknowledging the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, Shawnee, Kickapoo communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. I wish to acknowledge the strength and resilience of these and all indigenous peoples who have endured and continue to steward the land that we all are privileged to call home. In addition to giving our respect for these and all indigenous peoples and ancestors of this place we call home, consider this acknowledgement a commitment on behalf of AMM to continue to learn about and to build relationships with the many indigenous communities and cultural centers in the Midwest region.
Thank you, Greg. Now for a few housekeeping notes. First of all, we welcome you all to have your video on, but please keep your audio muted. There will be points of time in this event that we will invite you to unmute, or we'll unmute for you and let you cheer and clap for our guest of honor today. But we would like to see your faces. Even if we can't hear you cheer and clap when you're muted, we can still see your smiles and joy and celebration. We also welcome you to post comments and questions as you have them in the chat. Any questions that you post we'll get to during the Q&A portion of the event. And comments, of course, we welcome any kind of encouraging words for our honorees today. For those of you getting to know AMM for the first time today, I'd like to provide a little bit of background information on our organization and this program. AMM was founded in 1927, making our association one of the oldest museum associations in this country. We're focused on connecting individuals and organizations in the Midwest and supporting their work through capacity building programs and networking events and resources. Our membership across 8 states and beyond includes museums and historic sites, art centers, science centers, zoos, and libraries, you name it, they're in the mix. Normally, we'd all be in a ballroom somewhere in the Midwest to celebrate our award recipients as part of our annual conference. And when the conference was canceled this year, we were forced to go online, like many of you who are in museums have had to do with your programming. I would say it's been a silver lining, though, for us to get to host our awards celebrations virtually this year. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure, honor and privilege to get to celebrate with all of our members, their local community members, family, and friends. Thank you all who've joined us today to be a part of this event for the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. Before we begin the awards program, I'm going to take care of a few introductions. First, you've already met Greg Whitcup, one of our board members, and also our awards committee chair. Also joining us are other members of the AMM board, and please wave if you're out there. I think I caught several names in the mix. Brenda Rainey, Leslie Wright, Katie Van Allen, and I think Whitney Owens is on somewhere in there. Thanks for being here. Our guests of honor this afternoon are the staff and leadership of the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, Kathy Free, President and CEO, Brian Mancuso, Chief Officer of Engagement, Bethany Thomas, Vice President of Education and Engagement. I know many of you have joined us from the AMM network, as well as friends and colleagues and community members of and partners of the museum. Thanks to everyone again for being here. Last, I'd like to introduce Joy Tehan-Radel, Director of Museums and Collections at Catalog It, our awards program series sponsor. We're grateful that Catalog It stepped up to help us make this awards program happen virtually this year in spite of the canceled conference, and for their participation in AMM over the last few years. Please join me in a round of applause and appreciation for their support, and to welcome Joy to offer brief remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Charity. I'm Joy Tahan-Riddell, Director of Museums and Collections at Catalog It. We're proud to be sponsoring the AAM Awards program. This is the 5th and final award this year, and all the recipients have been so inspiring and the event so touching. I feel very privileged to have been a part of this program. I want to take a minute to congratulate this year's Best Practices Award recipient, the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, for their exhibition project, Fix, Heartbreak and Hope Inside Our Opioid Crisis. Making their museum a safe space to talk about such a difficult topic, Kathy Furry and her staff aim to reduce the stigma and create empathy surrounding this disorder. You have helped your community shift the conversation and offered information and resources in order to explore potential solutions to this devastating issue. Congratulations again to Kathy Furry, President and CEO, and the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. This is a crisis that has touched so many, and you have taken the lead in your community, courageously engaging and supporting Indiana communities affected by the opioid crisis. On behalf of Catalog It, I would like to sincerely thank you.
Thank you, Joy. And now it's time for the moment we've all been waiting for, the awards presentation. To present the award officially to Kathy and the team at the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites is Greg Whitcup.
Thank you, Charity. It is an honor to serve the museums of the Midwest through the work we do at the Association of Midwest Museums. It has been a particular pleasure to work with my colleagues on the annual awards program this year. Each year, we recognize one cultural institution that has demonstrated leadership in the field through distinguished museum practices or innovative programming. Thought leadership that has the potential to redefine and shape the field nationwide. This year, our honoree for the AMM Best Practices Award is the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites for their path-breaking new 7,000 square foot exhibition, Fix, Heartbreak and Hope Inside Our Opioid Crisis. The arresting nature of this project begins with the title, Fix. This deceptively short, 3-letter word, acting in the title as both a noun and a verb, first defines a problem and then announces a call to action. It grabs your attention, takes your hand, and pulls you into the exhibition. Fix is an expansive exhibition, one that first defines how the opioid crisis has ravaged families and cities across Indiana, and indeed much of the nation, and then offers a safe place to talk about the crisis, engage visitors in difficult but courageous conversations, offer information and resources, and explore potential solutions. Fix accomplishes this goal through not only thoughtful, easy to access content, including a deliberate choice of words that combat stigma, but also through the exhibition's engaging design, the exhibition layout, use of graphics, and even the decision to use bright, neon, optimistic colors. Perhaps most important, however, is the decision the museum made on day one to work closely with a broad range of state and local partners who could not only advise, but play an integral role in developing the exhibition. By working with state officials, healthcare providers, advocacy groups, the recovery community, and the families directly affected by the crisis, the museum not only asked them to come to the museum to brainstorm, but they also gave them agency to help make a difference. Fix is not only an exhibition about Indiana, but an exhibition for Indiana. Their courage to lead the way in supporting Indiana communities affected by the crisis, their community-driven approach to content development, and their thoughtful design of the exhibition have set a new standard for institutions in the Midwest region. It is my pleasure to present this year's Best Practices Award to the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. To accept the award on behalf of the institution is Kathy Ferrier, President and CEO.
Thank you, Greg. We certainly appreciate this recognition and the hard work that went into it. Many times you hear it takes a village. In this case, it took a state. So if you will bear with me, there are multiple people, as we talked about working within the community. I don't name all 50, but I name a good portion of those people that had a significant contribution to making this success. I'd first like to thank the Indiana State Museum Board of Directors, and we actually have 3 members with us today: Melissa Kaido, Alice Sloss, and Andy Dahlem. I'd also like to add that Andy Dahlem contributed his professional counsel to this project, as he currently works at the Indiana University Medical School teaching pharmaceuticals. So thank you, Andy, Alice, and Melissa, and for the board for showing the courage and the vision to allow us to produce this project. I'd also like to thank the entire staff of the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. It was and is a statewide project and will continue to be through August 1st of 2021. There is a core team of people that I would like to recognize today: Brian Mancuso, Susanna Kerber, Bethany Thomas, Kathy Donnelly, Adam DeCamper, Jordan Statz, and Mark Rushman. That is an incredible, talented team of people who you will learn more and more about as we proceed through the program. Then we would also like to especially thank the sponsors who stepped forward and recognized how important this was: the Next Level Recovery of the Indiana Family and Social Service Administration, the Ball Brothers Foundation, the Ephraimson Family Fund, a CICF fund, George and Frances Ball Foundation, the CVS Health, JSI, the Jasper Furniture, and Barnes & Thornburg, LLP. We'd also like to identify some individuals within the communities who brought a lot of their expertise and loaned their time and money with us. Chief Justice Loretta Rush of the Indiana Supreme Court, Doug Hunsinger, the Executive Director of Indiana's Drug Prevention, Treatment, and Enforcement, Becky Buhner, the Deputy Director, Addiction and Forensic Treatment, State Opioid Treatment Authority, Justin Phillips of the Overdose Lifeline. That one shopping trip turned into what you're seeing today. Thank you, Justin. Brandon George of the Indiana Addictions Issue Coalition, Wade of the Young Actors Theater, Dr. Robin Newhouse, Dr. Wanda Thurston, Eric Afuse, and Lisa Fukuda of the IU School of Nursing, Eileen Misluck and Chelsea Leeds, Heron School of Art and Design at IUPUI Arts Art Therapy, Natasha Thomas and Megan Masco of IUPUI School of Engineering and Technology, Department of Music and Arts Technology, Bill Ellis, Indiana Rural Health Association, and Jim Irsay and the Jim Irsay Collection for sharing the original manuscript of the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book. I'd also like to recognize the artist and production teams that worked with us. That would be C. Thomas Lewis, Phil Campbell, Bill Foley, Laura Halsman, and Meredith Brickle, Richard Lewis Media Group, Lucy Design, and Boomerang Exhibits. And lastly, we'd like to thank the brave men and women who came in to share their stories of heartbreak and hope with us and our visitors. We hope to do that today. We have 3 short videos that will help you understand how this program came to fruition, what the exhibition looks like, and how we hope it affects the visitors that we do. And we would also have a story of heartbreak and hope. So Charity, you'd start the first video. Thank you all very much.
This is not your typical museum exhibit. It really is an unexpected project.
The first few conversations were, you want to what?
The team at the Indiana State Museum wanted to create something unconventional.
No state is doing anything like this.
An exhibit that would shed light on a complicated issue affecting Hoosiers and people all over the country, the opioid crisis.
Museums are a place where you're invited in to ask questions and be curious. And this is a topic that normally, if you ask more than one or two questions, people start to question you. So I wanted an opportunity for people to get information so that they could use it in a way that was beneficial rather than making up or filling in the blanks about things we don't know. It's not a topic that you wake up on Saturday morning and say, oh wow, let's go learn about the opioid crisis. But it is a topic that your family has conversations about, potentially thinks about. People are used to having conversations about things of the past so they don't have to face it, or they're interested in talking about things that don't personally affect them. But this is a disease that unfortunately affects almost anyone 1 or 2 removed, whether it's a neighbor or a teacher or a cousin. And it is in fact a disease, and that's something that I felt as a museum we could help get that message across.
Creating that message took time as the team worked to involve state leaders.
About 3.5 years ago, Kathy came to visit Jim McClellan and I, who was the state's first drug czar. We had a great conversation around how museums can be part of telling a story and part of really doing a great job of engaging an audience around controversial and sometimes complex topics.
The team knew in order to cover a topic this complex, they had to involve community partners, and most importantly, the recovery community.
My name is Brandon George, and I'm the director of Indiana Addictions Issues Coalition, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. I got approached by the State Museum saying that they were going to do an exhibit, or that they wanted to do an exhibit, but most importantly, they wanted to do it right. A lot of times I see stuff on the overdose crisis and I cringe a little bit because you got people from the outside that don't have an intimate understanding. And the State Museum did such an amazing job of involving community partners, family members of loved one with addiction, people with substance use disorder, and to see something and something done so right and so kind of purely and accurately gives me a bunch of joy. It really does.
After years of gathering input, Fix came to life.
Fix is a 7,000 square foot, hands-on, interactive exhibit focused around Indiana's opioid crisis, really the nation's opioid crisis. We settled on the tagline of the exhibit, Heartbreak and Hope Inside Our Opioid Crisis. And we really felt that it's not the opioid crisis, it's ours. We're all in it, we all have a part to play. And so we leaned into what we do best, is really breaking things down in an exhibit, making it hands-on, making it engaging, making it for everyone so that they could come in here and really dig into the crisis and understand it from their own perspective.
This is a topic that is complicated and complex and has multiple sides to it, and is very important in how you describe it. The language you use, the references you make. It is all vitally important that we get it right. Probably the biggest compliment we got was from the recovery community that we did do it right. And that's who we were serving, because that's the story we want to tell. Not the story of despair, but the story of recovery, and that there is a way for the community, for the person, for the country to recover from this very difficult disease.
Thank you, Charity. The second video will take you a little deeper into what the exhibition, the different areas within the exhibition, and the philosophy that we used in order to put it together. So with that, Charity, we'll start our second video. Thank you.
Everything in Fix is centered around reducing stigma, whether it's directly addressing that or whether it's understanding through history that we've been here before.
Our chief curator, Susanna Kerber, took this to heart and really took us back in a way that allowed people to understand that this isn't new. This isn't a new phenomena. It's been evolving and we've been working through it for years. So the idea that we can help people know that we've recovered from this and we've recovered from other things. So one of the things I think the team did was outstanding was show other opportunities that the country has had to recover, and the world actually to recover from things. So the AIDS crisis was a great example. No one understood it. We didn't handle it well in the beginning. We haven't handled this crisis as graciously as we would like to have either. And I think what the team did a good job of saying was, there's always a lot of discovery here, but if you keep moving forward, we can keep getting better and smarter, and we can make a difference.
The gallery itself is sort of laid out as the tagline is. It's from heartbreak to hope. It's not linear. It's really open, and you can make lots of free choices, and we hope that people find their in if they're really interested in the science. We have a giant brain that you can go in and learn how your brain works. If they want to be immersed in a story of somebody who's in recovery and somebody who creates work around recovery, you can go into Phil Campbell's Fabric Fort and experience his story. And so there are these pieces throughout the gallery that move you from heartbreak to hope that are constantly based on empathy that we really want to focus on. One of the pieces that I enjoyed really working on was our Young Actors Theater piece. And while we were asking people for stories, we got some great advice and said that we really can't ask teens for stories because they are not of the age of consent. But the Young Actors Theater in town had a program going on. They were building up a composite character, and so we worked with them to really bring a transmedia piece into the experience, so you're kind of almost in the middle of their play, and the characters are authentic because they did a lot of research and they did a lot of community research with that.
There's a couple areas that I thought were critical that they touched on. One, that this wasn't just about opioids. There's twice as many people die from alcohol than opioids every year. And also the impact that it has on our Black and brown communities compared to our white communities. I really thought it was vital that got talked about. I thought that the State Museum would be hesitant to do so because it's a sensitive topic. And they were the opposite of that. They wanted to make sure that they got it in. They broached those subjects. They talked about disparities in the crack cocaine epidemic versus this overdose crisis, how it was treated differently, and really took on some tough conversations that, quite frankly, I didn't think that they'd be willing to do.
It was more about what are the tools and the ways that we can tell this story and bring this story to people so that they can hear it, utilizing all of the things that museums do best.
We're really asking people to put themselves in the shoes of those in recovery. We're asking people to understand the art and the science and the history of this crisis and kind of come at it from a bunch of different sides.
This last story is quite amazing unto itself. Charmin Garbard, who'd also participated in the exhibit, has taken the time today to share her story of heartbreak and hope. Charity?
As coordinator for the Fayette County Harm Reduction Alliance and as a person in long-term recovery, Charmin is one of the many brave Hoosiers who agreed to share their story for the Fix exhibit.
It went from alcohol at 9 to substances of all sorts by 13 years old.
Charmin says growing up, she suffered from physical and sexual abuse and eventually turned to alcohol and other substances to cope with the trauma.
By the time I was 16 years old, I had overdosed twice. By the time I had my first child, I was prescribed opioids. It went from being prescribed opioids to, at 36 years old, being an IV drug user of heroin. My life ended up rotating in and out of the prison system for 10 years. I've spent over 10 years of my life incarcerated. In our minds as individuals with substance use disorder, we say and we promise and we really want to do what we say. But you just can't stop. And then you got the fear of losing your children.
Like many suffering from substance abuse disorder, Charmin's cycle of dependence continued for years. But eventually, while in prison, Charmin says a note she received from her youngest son, who was 7 at the time, helped her see a path to recovery.
The jailer gave me the letter, and it said, "You are so a good mom, and I forgive you." When I realized that he could forgive me, I had to learn how to forgive the people that had hurt me. I had the opportunity to have a 12-step mentor from the outside So for 32 weeks, I worked 2 hours every Tuesday with a woman from the outside. I got involved in Al-Anon. I read every motivational book that I could get my hands on. I started going to church. Those people that volunteered to come inside the prison made a difference in my life. What God had done for me, I had to share with others, because if I could change, then I knew anyone could change.
Charmin has changed drastically. Now 7 years in recovery, she's earned her bachelor's degree in psychology, she's become a first-time homeowner, and she's even completed a marathon.
I am now the vice president of our drug coalition, and I am the coordinator for the Fayette County Harm Reduction Alliance.
Charmin says sharing her story is now part of her mission.
All of that pain gave me purpose.
And that exhibits like Fix show it's possible for those suffering to not only find treatment, but to recover.
It's never too late. As long as someone has breath in their body, it is not too late. As long as we have tools to help someone, that is our responsibility to humanity.
So we know now trauma is the real gateway drug. If there was one message I'd have for people is that there's hope. There's a solution. Treatment works. Recovery is possible.
We lay out 3 things on the way out. We have a panel. 1 is choose your words carefully in your conversation. 2 is have a conversation or reach out to someone in need, and maybe it's someone around you, maybe it's someone in the community. And the 3rd is get trained on Narcan. It's so easy, it's so important. Every Narcan administered is another chance at recovery.
We're going to have some great metrics around number of visitors. I know there's been some visitor surveys that have been done, and we're really going to be able to see a change in the stigma around people who have visited this exhibit.
All of these partners came together and trusted us. And they trusted us with very important stories, whether it was their profession, their responsibility through state government, their responsibility as healthcare providers, or their personal stories. And that people were willing to trust us, I believe is the biggest compliment a museum can have.
Kathy and the team from Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, what a wonderful video presentation. I just want to say that I've watched these videos now 3 times, and I am brought to tears each time. Extraordinary. At this time, I welcome everyone to unmute, and please join me in a round of applause and in gratitude for Kathy and Brian and Bethany and the entire team from the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites for their work on Fix. Feel free to cheer and hoot and holler if you want. Thank you so much for your important work with this project and for setting an example, a model that other institutions in this region can follow. It's been great to just watch the videos, and I look forward to learning more as we go further into the program today. For the next segment of this event, we would like to have a moderated conversation with the team, with Kathy and Brian and Bethany. I've put together a few of our burning questions about this project and welcome all of you who are joining us today to post your questions in the chat. I saw that some had already started to do this during the presentation. We will get to your questions as soon as we can and kind of intersperse them between our own as a part of this conversation today. And then while we do this, please, if you're not a team member from the museum, please stay muted so that we can all see and hear them. To start off, I actually wondered, this is something that every time I have seen the videos about the exhibit, and Brian mentions the Fabric Fort story that's in the exhibit. I wondered if, Brian, if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So the Fabric Fort is one of our art pieces in the exhibit, as Kathy mentioned. In the video, we have many, many ways into the experience. We have science and history and art and theater. And so we wanted to use art as an engaging medium for those visitors who wanted to experience the Fix story through art. through that, Mark Rushman has been working, he's our curator of culture, or I'm sorry if I got that title exactly wrong, Mark, he's frowning, that he's been working with this gentleman in the community, Phil Campbell, who he used to work in carving and print, and now he works in fabrics and textiles, and he's been creating these forts. Phil is at Ashkenazi as a recovery coach, and he builds these, he built them kind of really smaller, these fabric forts to be safe, and these security blankets. And so we commissioned him and we said, you know, we'd love you to come in and build one for us that's bigger, that you learn about your recovery story and your recovery practice through art inside that fort. So before COVID, in the before times, you used to be able to go in there and it's all made out of men's dress shirts, and there's this wall of pockets, and you could pull out parts of his story that's printed on fabric and kind of read his story and hang out inside there and be literally inside Phil's story and have that very different experience. It's also kind of a neat little sub-safe space inside FIC. So it serves a lot of features. I don't know if you could see in any of Bethany and I's photo, maybe mine, I don't know if it's in that view, but it also serves as another visual anchor that moves people through the space. You've got the brain and you've got that fabric fort that are really big, chunky anchors. So it's doing a lot of work in there.
Wow, how cool. I know I need to get down and see it. Kathy, my next question is for you, and of course, feel free to pitch to other members of the team to add to this. The videos mentioned the use of multiple entry points, so like art and science, history, to engage people in this conversation. Can you tell us more about your audience for this exhibit and why you chose that approach?
You know, this was a tough topic to start with, but we also know that people have different learning styles and preferences about where and how they will address a topic. So we thought it was really important, and we've learned through an NSF grant that it would look as if in the project we were working on that only certain people went to the interactives and only people went to the stories. But what we found was they went to the interactives and then went to the stories, or they went to the stories and then went to the interactives. So in this experience, we wanted to have entry points. If you're interested in science, you have the brain right away. As Brian said, it's a big anchor. If you're interested in art, you could go in the fort and start to engage yourself immediately in the stories. And if you're really interested in history, you can find out all those amazing artifacts in the story that Susanna put together. The humanities component runs throughout with the stories. So we just felt it was important to not only have entry points for your learning style, but for your comfort as well.
Great.
Brian or Bethany, Susanna, Mark, anybody would like to add to that?
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So this question I'm gonna toss out there to Bethany, and feel free to pass it along to others on the team too. This is not your typical state museum project, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to acknowledge this project with the Best Practices Award. And this is particularly because it's so timely and because it addresses a public health crisis. What are some key takeaways that you have that you'd like to share with your peers in the Midwest who may be considering similar projects related to COVID-19 or other issues or events in their area?
Yeah, thank you. Especially from my perspective, as Kathy mentioned and you saw in the videos, we work with so many different community partners, each with their own expertise or their different perspectives. And I think that was really critical on how we could work together, especially as you can imagine, some of our community partners had never worked with a museum before. And so, we were learning from each other on how do we combine these expertise so that we can provide such a amazing and thought-provocative exhibit and experience for our visitors. So as you heard, some of the partners that we work with too, anywhere from our advocacy and recovery groups to IU School of Nursing and Grand Challenge community partners, to art therapy, music therapy, and even local production with different young actors, theater, and youth. doing their perspectives through performances. And so we've had this great cluster of our partners that really helped meld this together to create the experience that we have today.
Oh, great. I saw a related question come in through the chat, and then if anybody else wants to add to the answers to this question, feel free. Have you done any programming or partnering about other social impacts of addiction, such as unhoused populations, foster care needs?
I will say at this juncture, we have not. This was a difficult topic to take on. But we are always looking at how this topic and this experience and these partnerships may grow into other programmatic opportunities. The most important thing that Bethany said was you never know what one, sort of when you do networking professionally, you never know who the next person you meet might be your new boss. In this case, you know, it's always that next partner. When you speak to your partners, who else are you working with? Who else should we be talking to? And that is why we were able to get such a depth and breadth of personalities and views and perspectives. And so always remember, it can seem overwhelming at times, easy for me to say. Bethany and Brian are breathing heavily, but it really did pay off that we were able to take all that information in. And it's really important that you are able to work within the community and hear the community. Mark Rushman knows the art community well, so the artists were willing to have conversations with him. And I think had it been someone outside of the community trying to encourage artists to become part of a museum experience, not as art, but as experiences, it might have been more difficult. But it took a lot of conversation and intrigue in order to see how we could best take advantage of none of their artistic skills, but the story that they might be able to help us tell.
You know, and one thing kind of at the heart of that question, Charity, is that Fix seems like a timely exhibit that's ripped from the headlines. It really isn't. It's an exhibit that addresses something that's happening currently, but that thing has been happening for quite some time. So we were able to move at the speed of museum and react, I think, in a quick way for museums in general, but museums are not nimble, and exhibitry is not the most reactive medium that we have in our disposal. So I would just caution folks that are looking at, you know, reacting to COVID or reacting to X or Y or Z that's happening in the news, to really be honest about your capabilities and be honest about how fast you can move, both internally and, you know, will the paint dry in time? Can you get prints? There's some practical stuff, but also just like going from 0 to 100 for most museums is going to be a real big challenge. So maybe even before you need to react, have that conversation in-house. I think that would be really useful. We had it ongoing. We were in the early parts of the project, we were building the airplane as we were taking off, and we were able to land the thing, which was great. But really, you know, just maybe have those conversations early on. That would be really great.
It's good advice. I saw another question come in through the chat. I'm going to direct this one to Kathy. Was there any resistance to the exhibition? If so, how did you approach this?
Mark is laughing. I don't know why I think that's funny. I will tell you, the most impressive moment was when the board of directors, I had been with the museum less than a year when I asked if we could begin looking into this, and they all unanimously approved the ability to move forward. So that was really a moment of incredible vision for them. If we had any resistance there, it might have made the project harder, but knowing when you have the support of your board, you're able to move forward. And then secondly, when we started working with Becky and with Doug and with Brandon, we knew that we were getting additional perspectives. With that said, you're never going to be able to address every issue or make everyone happy. There is a big concern that in some way, it was very important to us to not demonize opioids. They are a very effective drug when used appropriately, but it is hard for people to sometimes see something like this and think that we were trying to demonize it or not. And so the pain community struggles quite a bit with what we're trying to accomplish. We have invited members of the community to come in when they're see if we could have a conversation around that. But there can be an audience that you can't serve, and we had to resign ourselves to that. And it was very difficult.
A lot of the resistance often we get through email and starts out with, I haven't seen the exhibit, but it's terrible. So I think that is telling somewhat, and we've always invited, our personal time, mine, Bethany's, Kathy's, to tour them around the exhibit, explain why that's there. There's a decision behind every piece. We made it thoughtfully, we made it consciously, we made it empathetically. And we're happy to always talk about that, like this right here. But yeah, the pain community, I think, is always still going to have a problem with fix on its surface. I think if they join us in it, we can have a very different conversation.
Well, thank you.
If I could say something quickly, I think the success of this exhibit speaks to the leadership of Kathy. She did probably run up into quite a bit of opposition, or at least question of doing this. But she really trusted her staff. She empowered us to push the envelope and to really deliver on this and feel like we really came together as a team to create something worthwhile and beneficial to the community. So Kathy deserves a great deal of credit for leading us on this, and I'm just thrilled to be part of it. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. What a great testimonial to your leadership, Kathy. My next question I'm going to direct to Brian. Today in the video presentations, we got to see one of the powerful personal stories that are featured in the exhibit. Can you tell us about your approach to engaging those individuals that you featured and collecting their stories for the exhibit?
So again, this is where our partners factor heavily. We initially, we worked with a hospital in town and got some just amazing initial advice on that. Again, waving us off of the age limits of who we could talk to and really who we couldn't ethically. The other one was that we thought we would pass it off to recovery groups and they could immediately recruit people for us. That ended up to be a kind of a violation of people's, the trust between physicians and those in recovery. And so they waived us off of that. So we were able to put together kind of an ask that was then disseminated through those groups rather than direct asks to people. And we had to wait for folks to come to us. Thankfully, we had an amazing media partner in Richard Lewis Media Group out of Boston. They were able to, their great producer, Andrew, he came out and he was really the one that did the interviews. So between Kathy Donnelly, our amazing exhibit developer, he sort of built that personal trust and personal relationships, and then Andrew came in and was able to bring his skill as a videographer and an interviewer into that process. And so there was a lot of, it was sort of a slower burn, but a lot more trust building through kind of almost a kind of a trust economy that the recovery groups trusted us, people trusted the recovery groups, therefore transitive property, people kind of trusted us initially, and then that was transferred to Kathy and Andrew as they began their direct filming with everyone. We had 17 people come forward that are featured in the exhibit, either directly in recovery or have lost loved ones to the crisis.
I will say that there were components of this experience that were required. And one of them was that we were not telling these stories, that our mission is to tell real stories about real people. And so we had to work particularly hard. And there were days when it seemed as if it wasn't possible, but because we knew that was the component that would make this exhibition have an impact, we kept pushing. So I think it's important when you look at a project like this, what are those things that without you don't meet your goals, and to not be deterred but to ask multiple people how you might come at something like this.
And Kathy, do you feel like this process and this working on this project and working with all these community partners and individuals was sort of a life-changing experience for even your team?
Absolutely. I think it was an incredible opportunity for all of us to push ourselves professionally in how it is we would work in the future. We know that we are here to serve the communities that we are in. That we need to be relevant. Museums are constantly looking for relevancy. And I think that this gave us a window into a multitude of ways that we can utilize, whether it's through programming, exhibit design, collecting, that we could sort of change the way we operate.
Great, thank you. Bethany, how has COVID-19 affected your plans for the exhibit and related programming?
Well, like many of our colleagues here today, COVID has really impacted all of our lives, but specifically with Fix, we were shut down for a few months, and we've been able to reopen, which is lovely because we're still available for people to see the exhibit in person, but we've had to adapt and pivot on what we can do moving forward as well. So, and that includes our historic sites who are also trying to do some programming in their communities around not just this topic, but the topics that were meaningful and important happening in their own towns as well. So we're fortunate to have some funding that we can start doing some virtual programs for school groups, because school groups were going to be a large component of our audience visiting this exhibit. And now that schools aren't going anywhere, so we're pivoting there and being able to create some program modules that we can make available to schools and teachers in their classrooms, as well as educational resources. And again, that's where our community partners, it's not just us alone creating that, we're working with our community partners to make sure those are rich and fulfilling and meet all the standards necessary as well. So we have a lot of those resources that we'll make available. And the beauty, of course, with virtual is it now not only hits Indianapolis or Indiana by itself, but can hit anyone nationally and even globally now. So we're hoping we'll see even a broader impact in this exhibit and what we're doing and the work we're doing here. So, and again, we're able to move forward in what those different areas are, and being able to invite the recovery community folks to come in and visit, and just different components like that. And then we're fortunate enough to have a partnership with Minnetrista in Muncie, and they are going to get the exhibit or portions of the exhibit for their museum as well for a 6-month run after ours is done. So it's going to continue on even when it's not here at the State Museum. It's going to continue on, and that's something that we're committed to, that even though we don't have the physical exhibit, that we are still having these conversations in our community with our partners as long as needed, and we'll be there to work with them and bring that hope and helpfully find those solutions we can to this crisis.
Great, thank you. I did notice that someone else had posted in the chat earlier that they were curious if there would be a traveling version of this or some components for travel. Not that it's the best environment right now to talk about traveling exhibits, but it's, there might be interest out there.
And that really, Charity, when you, since the museum people kind of, we have a tendency to jump in and out of topics or serving audiences. And we as an institution committed to addressing this, whether the exhibition is here or at Minnetrista. So the programs that Bethany is developing within these communities will continue even after the exhibition leaves. And I think if you go back to making a commitment to a relevant topic, making a commitment to a difficult topic, we made a big commitment, and we are gracious, and I have to, because it's appropriate, thank FSSA and Becky for funding the ability for us to now put this virtually, so that it will have a much longer impact even beyond the traveling component to Minnetrista. So we are grateful to the Ball Brothers Foundation, who also is helping support that.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions. I'm going to pull one from the chat here. And I think I'll direct this to Brian, maybe. Could you talk about the choice of color and aesthetics for this topic in the exhibit?
Right. A couple things factored into that. One was Brandon George, who you met in the video. He really, during another meeting with an unrelated project, had a strong reaction to how folks in recovery are usually portrayed. You know, usually it's 800 grain, black and white photos, dead set, right to the camera. There's a brick wall in the background. It has a distinct feel to it. And really, that was a thing that he just pushed back against that other project and felt that that was really inappropriate and didn't represent his community. And so we took that as a challenge to go a complete 180 and really feel like we could do something else. We wanted it to feel like nothing that came before, because we were breaking with everything that came before. We're breaking things that are out there in the health museum community or the health exhibit community. And in the original designs, and this plays through if you're in the exhibit live, that those colors of sort of that cyan and yellow and magenta, they kind of have an optical illusion that you're sort of perceiving either one or the other at a given time. And so, originally we had the title of Addiction and Recovery, and that became something we ought not use, but those were kind of printed on top of each other, and you could either perceive one or perceive the other, and you were constantly flipping back and forth. And that felt like something we wanted our visitors to do in the exhibit. We wanted them to constantly flip back and forth. So that's sort of the graphic design and the color choice, but with the structures of the pieces in the exhibit, Lucy Design in Chicago really helped us refine that, helped us come up with this sort of concept that maybe some people pick up on, maybe they don't, but the exhibit forms get less chaotic as you move from Heartbreak to Hope. They get more stable, they feel safer to be in. Some of them are these kind of slats not at right angles, and then you go to the other side and there's nice sheets of plywood. It feels more stable, it feels more secure. You end up in the fort, you feel like you're in a safe place. So the design just works on so many different levels.
Great, thanks for the explanation. All right, I don't see any additional questions in the chat, so I'm just gonna offer up a final question from myself, which is a question I like to ask museum people for the benefit of museum people, because we all like to learn from one another's lessons on projects like this. And I'd love to hear from each of you. So Kathy and Brian and Bethany, I'd love to hear your responses to this question. If you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
So Bethany, why don't you go first?
Putting me on the spot, thanks.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we're all very proud of what we did do. I think for me on the programming side and working with our sites across the state, I know that was a challenge, when there was not a physical presence of an exhibit that could move, either rotate or move around, how to help steward the partnerships in their community, and starting that maybe sooner so that they had plenty of time to develop those relationships and figure out what the community needs were, so that they could find what was relevant within their specific towns and communities. So they all worked very hard and did great with what they're doing. And the good thing is it's not over yet. So, as COVID, and we've had to shift and some things have to be postponed and everything else, we still have plenty of time to continue to have those conversations. I think, we're learning from that, and we'll just grow from that. And I think we've then are establishing some of these first partnerships that we may never have had in the past if it wasn't for this experience.
Brian?
This is starting to feel targeted. Mine will be a very hyper specific thing that maybe no one else will learn from. But we have a piece in the exhibit called CraveBot, which uses these commercial grade small form robots to build empathy with our visitors to kind of get them in the headspace of craving and not being able to do the thing that you want to do because something else is pulling you there. It is a really big swing for an exhibit piece, for exhibit technology, of combining not only physical joystick controls, but these little robots that we had to make do what we wanted to do, and a projection system that knew where the robots are. It is It's finally there. I think it works great. It tells the story we wanted to, but it was really hard getting there. We are always wanting to push the envelope in-house with our capabilities, of stretching our capabilities. That was one, and I think I may have stretched the staff to the limit on that one. And I would probably maybe set that expectation up a little bit better. Hi, David's cat. The expectation a little bit better in the future.
Interesting. Kathy.
I think what, for me, in my position, I have learned, and it's not necessarily what I would do differently, it's what I will do differently. And that is recognize some of what we've learned from that, and that perseverance, patience, that when you address something this difficult, you have to keep going, you have to have faith, and you have to continue to recognize the impact you will have rather than the barriers that are in front of you. So this was particularly, there were some moments, Mark and Susanna and Brian and Bethany and Kathy will contest, and Adam, where they were like, she is out of her mind. This is just not gonna work. I don't know why we think this can work. And I would just caution that if you have real passion and understanding that you believe something can happen, that you have to persevere too, as a team and as an institution. And we just need to remember to take that perseverance with us.
Great, thank you. Great reflections. I want to say a quick thank you, Kathy and Bethany, Brian, for your candor and honesty during this conversation today and welcoming us into your process, into the behind the scenes for this project. It's really been fascinating to learn from you and to learn about your experience and approach to the exhibit. I also just like to thank you for being a part of the AMM community and, you know, for really, I think Greg used the word courage earlier, you know, really having the courage to tackle this subject and like I said, essentially creating a model that others can follow and sharing all of that with us today. We're proud to have your institution in the Midwest and in our community of museums. I'd like to say again, thank you to all who joined us today. Before we officially close out the event and have one more round of applause for our guests of honor, I'd like to invite Greg Whitcott back to offer a few closing remarks.
Thank you again, Charity. Well, on behalf of the members of the Association of Midwest Museums, AM's Board of Directors, and our Executive Director, Charity Counts, I not only want to extend another round of congratulations to the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites for their well-deserved Best Practices Award, but I would also like to once again thank and offer our congratulations to all of this year's award recipients. The Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis for their History at Home St. Louis Strong initiatives, recipient of one of 2 Silver Lining Awards. Heather Miller, Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Chicago, recipient of the Promising Leadership Award. The Glesner House in Chicago, recipient of the second of 2 Silver Lining Awards. And Kathy Kelsey-Foley, Director of the Lee Yawkey Woodson Art Museum in Wausau, Wisconsin, recipient of the Distinguished Career Award. Finally, I would like to thank everyone that submitted an application for an award this year. Believe me, there was more than one time when the members of the awards committee stopped our deliberations and suggested we simply recognize all of the applications. Of course, we were far from surprised. The applications represent the strength of museums and historic sites across the Midwest. Stay tuned for next year's annual awards program. And thank you again, Charity, for your leadership. We all benefit from your support. I'll let you close it out.
Well, thanks, Greg. I was trying to figure out how to follow that actually. I wasn't expecting all your words. Kathy, Brian, Bethany, and to all at the Indiana State Museum who are on this event today and who are not, congratulations once again. I now invite everyone to unmute one more time and congratulate today's honorees at the Indiana State Museum Historic Sites. Please cheer loudly. This is a great project. Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us. I would like to ask that the State Museum team stay on, along with board members who are able, for a quick photo op at the end. And to all, and have a great weekend and Thanksgiving holiday.
Which